General Hospital spoilers reveal that a new wave of psychological darkness is sweeping across Port Charles, one that no one saw coming and few are prepared to confront. At the center of this growing storm is Daisy, the infant daughter of Sasha and Michael, a child who has already endured too many whispers of danger for someone so young. 4 weeks now. There has been a lingering unease in the air, unexplained disturbances, missing items, fleeting shadows caught just out of view near the Quartermain estate. At first, it was easy to dismiss these events as exhaustion or coincidence. But now, that facade has crumbled. What began as unease has erupted into a full-fledged obsession. And the horror of it all lies in the revelation of who has been lurking in the shadows. Not Willow, as many feared, but someone far more dangerous, more calculating, and far more relentless, Nelle. This is not merely a return. It is a resurrection of the unhinged but cunning mind that once wreaked havoc on Michael's life and nearly destroyed every semblance of peace for those around him. Nelle's fixation has evolved into something far more refined and terrifying. Her reappearance is no accident, no desperate lunge from a cornered woman. It is a carefully orchestrated campaign of psychological warfare. Her target is not just Daisy, it is the entire world surrounding the baby. From Sasha's fragile maternal psyche to Michael's still open emotional wounds. And in the center of it all is Nelle, who has turned her obsession into a mission. The signs had been building, though few recognized them for what they truly were. It began with a mix-up in the hospital nursery, a baby wheeled into the wrong room, hospital tags misplaced or duplicated. Monitors flickering at suspicious times. Staff dismissed it as human error. Sasha questioned her memory. Willow's increasing instability made her the easy scapegoat. But the truth was far more insidious. Nelle had been there the entire time, slipping into the narrative like a ghost with unfinished business. When she finally stepped into Daisy's room and stood over her crib, it wasn't a random act, it was the culmination of weeks, perhaps months, of planning. What Nelle seeks now is not redemption or even revenge in the traditional sense. She is chasing a warped vision of motherhood, control, and identity. She sees Daisy not only as the daughter of the man she once believed belonged to her but also as a symbol of everything she lost, everything she believes was unfairly taken. In her twisted logic, reclaiming Daisy is her right, a way to rewrite history, to be the mother she never had the chance to become for Wiley. And in doing so, to punish Willow for ever stepping into that role. The obsession isn't only rooted in the past, it's blossomed into a disturbing future that Nelle has crafted entirely in her own mind. Where Daisy becomes the new centerpiece of a life she believes she was denied. Even more chilling is the idea that Nelle may be manipulating reality to an even greater degree. Rumors swirl that she has found ways to clone hospital tags, bribe staff, or exploit Willow's fragile mental state to her advantage. The narrative being whispered among the Quartermains and hospital staff is clear: Willow is unstable, emotionally broken, prone to blackouts and hallucinations. And it's this very narrative that Nelle may be using to cover her tracks. If anything goes wrong, Willow will be the one blamed. If Daisy disappears, suspicion will fall on Willow's deteriorating mind. In this way, Nelle is not just haunting their present, she is rewriting their entire reality from the shadows. Michael, who has spent years trying to put Nelle's ghost behind him, now finds himself staring at the possibility that not only is she alive, but she is once again close enough to breathe the same air as his daughter. And the trauma he tried so desperately to bury is threatening to resurface. Sasha, already emotionally exhausted, has begun to question whether her instincts are real or the result of postpartum fears. And Willow, whose identity has splintered under the pressure of loss, custody battles, and public scrutiny, is being manipulated into believing she's the threat when she's merely another piece on Nelle's chessboard. This is more than a stalker plot. This is the slow burn of a sociopath's masterpiece, unfolding in plain sight while no one truly understands its depth. The chaos Nelle brings with her is not immediate, it simmers. She destabilizes. She lingers. And by the time those around her realize what's happening, she's already 5 moves ahead. Her appearance beside Daisy's crib was not a moment of nostalgia or longing. It was a claim. A silent declaration that the child now belonged to her, if not legally, then psychologically. The final piece in her perverse puzzle of control. The implications of Nelle's return stretch far beyond the nursery. They threaten to unravel the already fragile alliances within Port Charles. Willow's mental health crisis will deepen under the weight of false accusations. Carly's fury will ignite anew, driven by the terror of losing another grandchild to Nelle's madness. Tracy, ever the strategist, may begin calculating what Nelle's reappearance means for Quartermaine holdings and public reputation. And Sonny, with his own history of vengeance and loss, may be forced into a moral crossroads, eliminate the threat permanently or risk watching his family fall apart all over again. This is not just the return of a villain. It is the rebirth of a nightmare. Nelle has learned from her mistakes, evolved into a far more dangerous version of herself, and now operates with the patience and precision of a puppeteer. Her strings are invisible, her presence often undetected, but her influence is undeniable. The only question that remains is whether anyone in Port Charles will be able to stop her before she once again brings everything, and everyone, to their knees. Because in the end, Nelle doesn't just want Daisy. She wants control. She wants to see Willow crumble, Michael despair, and Sasha shatter. She wants the world to believe the sister she once despised has become her. And if she has her way, she will make everyone in Port Charles believe that the most dangerous thing they ever feared wasn't Nelle herself, but what she could turn them into. Nelle's obsession with reclaiming control over Michael's life is no longer a lingering threat. It has evolved into a full-scale psychological siege, escalating in both intensity and unpredictability. This isn't merely about revenge or unfinished business from the past, it's about dominance, manipulation, and rewriting the narrative of a man she once believed belonged to her. The fact that Michael has moved on, built a life with Sasha, and become a father again only fuels Nelle's delusion that what he has now was rightfully hers. But what truly sets this new chapter into dangerous motion is the bombshell Nelle is prepared to unleash, the secret affair between Michael and Sasha. One that took place during a period of emotional chaos and uncertainty. A secret so volatile that, if exposed, could unravel every carefully constructed bond around Michael. Damage Sasha's already fragile image, and ignite a firestorm no one in Port Charles is equipped to contain. Nelle doesn't act without precision. She doesn't simply expose a secret, she weaponizes it. And in this case, her intent is to turn Michael's entire life into a battlefield, with Sasha at the epicenter of the implosion. What makes this strategy particularly lethal is that Sasha herself has barely recovered from the traumas she's endured. From addiction, to psychotic breaks, to custody challenges and romantic betrayal, she is barely holding her public and private persona together. Nelle knows this. She studies her enemies like prey. And now, with this affair being dangled like a blade over Sasha's head, Nelle has every intention of slicing through what little piece Sasha has left. But her ultimate goal isn't Sasha's destruction, it's Michael's reprogramming. By revealing the affair, Nelle doesn't just shatter his current relationship, she forces him into a moral crisis. One where loyalty, guilt, and shame collide. She wants him disoriented, vulnerable, alone. Because that is when she will strike, not with violence, but with manipulation. She will position herself as the one person who understands him, the only one who's ever accepted him in his darkest form, and the only woman who truly belongs by his side. It's an illusion wrapped in emotional toxicity, and it's designed to fracture Michael's identity from within. The consequences of Nelle's impending revelation are far-reaching. Willow, already teetering on the edge of a psychological abyss, will view this betrayal as validation of her worst fears. Her unraveling will accelerate, creating an emotional vacuum that could easily be filled by her alter ego, Nelle, should the dissociative identity disorder storyline continue. Meanwhile, the Quartermaine family, protective of both their reputation and their stake in Michael's future, will be forced into damage control, unsure whether to shield him or sacrifice him for the greater good. Tracy will see the scandal as a threat to the Quartermaine legacy. Carly, already haunted by Nelle's presence, will be driven to the edge. Desperate to protect her son from repeating the patterns that once almost destroyed him. Even more dangerous is the ripple effect this secret could have on Port Charles's legal and custodial balance. If the affair is proven to have happened during a time when Sasha was legally or medically unfit, the court could re-examine every decision made involving Daisy. Nelle could use this as leverage to reopen custody debates, asserting that both Sasha and Michael are morally compromised. And if she succeeds in implanting just enough doubt, she could slowly insert herself into Daisy's world, not as a criminal, but as a self-proclaimed protector. Nelle's mind games are far more sophisticated than before. She no longer needs to kidnap, steal, or forge identities. She uses the truth, or her version of it, as a tool to manipulate reality. Her campaign is subtle, strategic, and deeply personal. She knows Michael's history with abandonment, guilt, and responsibility. She knows how to frame her narrative so that he begins to question his own decisions, his worth, and even his love for Sasha. Her goal isn't to seduce him physically, it's to own him psychologically. And with each calculated move, she's drawing him deeper into a web of emotional dependence, while simultaneously dismantling every relationship that could rescue him. The madness of this entire situation is compounded by how Nelle cloaks her cruelty in clarity. She will claim to be the only one telling the truth, the only one unafraid to expose secrets. She will present herself as the reckoning no one else had the courage to bring. And some may believe her, not because she is trustworthy, but because the truths she wields are half real, and half invented. That is Nelle's genius. She blurs the line between delusion and revelation until even the most rational minds begin to fracture under pressure. What makes this all the more terrifying is that Michael may not see it coming. He's too focused on protecting Sasha, managing his fractured relationship with Willow, and navigating the volatile political climate within the Quartermain family. He doesn't realize that every step he takes is being shadowed by someone who knows him better than he knows himself. Nelle isn't coming for revenge. She's coming for possession. And in her mind, nothing, no marriage, no child, no truth, is sacred enough to stand in her way. The nightmare has only just begun. And when it ends, Michael may no longer recognize the life he once fought so hard to build. He may not even recognize himself. Wiley's accidental glimpse of the woman who once haunted his earliest days, the very mother whose memory had been buried under layers of silence and secrecy, has ignited a firestorm no one in Port Charles was prepared for. The chance encounter wasn't just a fleeting moment of recognition. It was the spark that shattered the illusion of safety the Corinthos family had carefully constructed around Daisy. Wiley didn't just see Nelle, he recognized something dark. Something buried deep within his subconscious. The image triggered fragments of memories, echoing nightmares he couldn't quite place but suddenly understood. And in that moment, innocence collided with intuition, as Wiley instinctively understood that the woman he saw near Daisy's room was a threat, not only to his baby sister, but to everything his family fought to rebuild. The resulting chaos became one of the most emotionally explosive turns in Port Charles's recent history. Wiley, shaken and visibly distressed, tried to alert Sasha and Michael. But at first, no one could understand the depth of his fear. The adults assumed it was trauma from recent events, or anxiety about Daisy's fragile condition. However, as Wiley grew more insistent, describing the woman's eyes, her voice, the strange familiarity he couldn't shake, it became undeniable. Nelle had returned, and she had been near Daisy. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The very woman who once tried to manipulate her way into Wiley's life was now circling like a vulture around his infant sister. This horrifying revelation didn't just blow a hole in the fragile peace surrounding the Quartermain estate, it exposed just how vulnerable they all still were. And as the implications sank in, a new truth emerged. It wasn't the adults who stopped Nelle's twisted plan, it was Wiley. The child she once tried to weaponize against Michael and Willow had now become her unexpected adversary. By recognizing her and speaking out, he disrupted whatever sinister strategy she was putting into place. In a chilling twist of irony, Wiley, who had been the pawn in Nelle's cruel games for years, now stood as the shield that protected Daisy from becoming the next victim. What followed was a series of revelations that sent shockwaves across town. Surveillance footage began to surface, showing a hooded figure lingering near the nursery wing. Sasha collapsed into panic, realizing how close Daisy had come to being taken. Willow, already unstable, spiraled further into a psychological abyss as guilt and fear consumed her. Jason and Michael immediately began putting a security task force in place, with Jason vowing that Nelle would not get close to either child again. Carly, upon hearing the news, felt a cold dread sink in. The nightmare she thought had ended had only been dormant, and now it was alive again, wrapped in Nelle's obsessive need to rewrite history. But even as the family scrambled to contain the situation, another truth began to take root. Wiley was no longer just a child in need of protection. He had become a protector himself. His actions had disrupted Nelle's trajectory, and in doing so, he had shifted the power dynamic of the story. Nelle, who had always relied on deception and invisibility, now faced a force she hadn't anticipated, her own son's memory, intuition, and courage. It was a stunning reversal of roles. One that not only halted Nelle's immediate plans but forced her into retreat. Yet the danger is far from over. Wiley's warning has set in motion a battle far deeper than anyone expected. Nelle, thwarted and exposed, is bound to return with greater fury. She sees Wiley's act of defiance not as a setback, but as a betrayal, a challenge she must crush if she's to reclaim control over the narrative. And that means everyone Wiley loves, Sasha, Daisy, Michael, even Willow, is now a target for a vengeance so personal it can't be measured. This isn't just about maternal delusion anymore, it's a war for psychological dominance. And as Wiley grows older, more aware, and more defiant, Nelle will stop at nothing to break him. The terrifying reality is that the next time Nelle strikes, she won't do so from the shadows. She will come armed with knowledge, secrets, and a twisted conviction that she is the rightful mother, the wronged woman, the one denied what should have been hers. Wiley may have stopped her this time, but the war Nelle is waging is far from over. And in the aftermath of this explosive confrontation, Port Charles will never be the same. The atmosphere in Port Charles had changed, thickened with anxiety, shadows lengthening even in daylight, as the whispers of a name long thought buried began to swirl with chilling momentum. Nelle. A name that once struck fear and frustration into the hearts of everyone who had ever crossed her path was once again being spoken, first as a ghost, then as a theory, and now, with terrifying clarity, as reality. The nightmare had returned, but this time, she wasn't simply haunting the past. She was rewriting the present, deliberately, calculatingly, destructively. And the first to feel the scorch of her resurrection were the two women most deeply entwined with her legacy, Willow and Sasha. For Willow, the news of Nelle's potential return was more than unsettling, it was a violent rupture in her already fragile psyche. She had barely begun to stabilize after the trauma of losing Wiley and Amelia. Barely regained her footing in a world that no longer gave her the maternal roles that once defined her. Her dreams had been littered with flashes of confusion, forgotten moments, and dark impulses she couldn't explain. And now, with the realization that her twin, her mirror, her torment, might be alive and lurking among them again, those nightmares began to blend into her waking life. The pressure from Drew, the judgment from Michael, and the isolation she felt every time Sasha glanced at her with unspoken concern, all coalesced into a suffocating fog. Willow felt it creeping in, this idea that maybe she wasn't whole, that maybe her mind wasn't hers anymore. She'd wake up with dirt under her fingernails and no memory of where she'd been. She'd find hospital equipment misplaced or hear Daisy crying and discover herself already beside the crib with no memory of how she got there. And as the paranoia grew, so did her fear that the persona she worked so hard to build, the caring mother, the loyal partner, the survivor, was cracking under the weight of something much darker. Something that Nelle had always represented. Something that maybe, just maybe, she had inherited. But for Sasha, the trauma was external, immediate, and terrifyingly familiar. Losing Liam had nearly destroyed her once. And the idea that Daisy, this child she now loved as her own, could be in the crosshairs of a woman like Nelle was enough to shatter every piece of calm she had worked to reconstruct. It wasn't just the misplaced baby at General Hospital. It wasn't just the way Daisy seemed to react to shadows, or the late-night creaks in the hallway. It was the presence, cold and calculating, that Sasha felt just beyond the corner of her vision. The sense that someone was watching. Someone who didn't just want to observe. Someone who wanted to take. Sasha tried to bring it up to Michael, tried to explain her dread without sounding hysterical. But Michael, distracted by his ongoing war with Drew and his attempts to keep Jason in the loop about Willow's mental unraveling, simply told her it was stress. That she was imagining things. But she wasn't. The nanny had seen it too, a figure standing outside the Corinthos estate at midnight, unmoving. Gone the moment she looked again. Sasha's calls to security, her instincts. Her desperation, it was all dismissed too easily. But in her heart, she knew the truth. And when she finally spoke the name, Nelle, it was like conjuring a demon. The fuse had been lit long before anyone realized it. Because Nelle didn't just return for Daisy. She came back for Michael. She came back for revenge. And more than that. She came back to reclaim a world that she believed had been stolen from her. Michael was her obsession, her delusion, her vendetta wrapped in fantasy. And now, with Sasha and Willow standing in her way, she wouldn't settle for simple confrontation. Nelle would play the long game. She would plant seeds of doubt. Manipulate memories. Sabotage trust. And she would do it all while no one truly believed she was back. Her first move had already unfolded without anyone knowing. The mysterious phone that had activated itself in Daisy's room, the one nurses assumed had been misplaced. The hospital bracelet that had been briefly removed and reattached slightly out of place. The mistake with the crib swap. Each moment had been orchestrated, not random, and not the work of an overstressed staff. Nelle had been inside. Nelle had touched the baby. Nelle had begun. And then came Wiley. He was older now, but children don't forget the faces that terrify them. He had been at the edge of the hallway, holding a toy, when he saw her. The woman standing outside the nursery window. The face that reminded him of his mother, but wasn't. He said nothing at first, unsure whether it was a dream. But later, when Sasha asked him who he was drawing with the long hair and the scary eyes, he whispered, "Mommy." And everything inside her turned to ice. The implications were catastrophic. If Wiley had seen her, then she had crossed the line from observer to predator. If Nelle was back and capable of coming that close to the children without being stopped, then no one was safe. And worse, what if Willow wasn't merely a victim of trauma and confusion, but a conduit? What if Nelle was manipulating her twin in some deeper way? Possession? Dissociation? The fear took root in Sasha's mind like a weed, growing uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Willow was unraveling. Her wedding to Drew, once a symbol of rebirth, now felt like a cage. Drew's controlling nature, his subtle gaslighting, and his constant obsession with Michael's downfall left her feeling like a pawn. But what scared her more was the way she couldn't recognize herself anymore. She had moments of lucidity, yes, but they were growing fewer. She would see her reflection and feel as if it wasn't hers. Hear someone call her name and instinctively think they were calling for Nelle. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just trauma. Something was breaking inside of her. And all the while, Nelle watched. From rooftops. From shadows. From the rearview mirror of Michael's car. She was always one step behind them, yet somehow always one step ahead. Her return wasn't about making a scene. It was about creating a world where the people who wronged her unraveled themselves. And Willow and Sasha were already halfway there. Eventually, someone would have to confront it. Jason. Perhaps, back from Europe with new clarity and a readiness to protect Michael and Sasha no matter the cost. Or Carly, sensing a threat to her grandchildren. Finally acknowledging the haunting figure in the periphery. But Nelle was counting on them to react. Counting on chaos. Because in chaos, she thrived. In disorder, she found power. And her endgame? It wasn't just about taking Daisy. It was about proving that she never left. That no matter how many graves they dug or how many memories they buried, she was always there. In the walls. In the blood. In the DNA of Port Charles itself. Because Nelle doesn't haunt. She returns. And this time, she's come home to stay.